Hello and welcome to the Geek Battle Gaming YouTube channel. Today we're going to be looking at the Evercade's Indie Heroes Collection number 3. So without further ado, let's get into it. Bosh! Another year, another exciting way to start things off in 2024 for Evercade. Indie Heroes Collection 3 is the third in the series of games made by various developers that are modern games for retro platforms. Like Indie Heroes Collection 2, most of the games available in this collection had previously been available for owners of Evercade VS, as well as last year on Evercade EXP, to download one at a time once a month, as Blaze's Game of the Month promotion allowed you to test them out. This year, there is a mix of platformers and puzzle games, and this includes games that were designed with Game Boy, NES, and Mega Drive, and maybe even other platforms in mind. Dodo is another example of a native game for the console, so it's created for Evercade rather than being emulation. And I think this was also the case with Bubble Seahorse Adventures. I'm sure there are some advantages beyond this just being cool that the developers were able to make a game directly on the Evercade, but a drawback for this with these games is that it didn't allow save states. The games this time include Thunderpaw, Big to Small, Dodo, Bubble Seahorse Adventures, Doodle World Redrawn, and a bunch more, and I'm going to go through them one by one. So let's take a look at each one in a bit more detail. Some of these I have previously reviewed on the channel individually when they were on the Game of the Month program, so check out all of the reviews there for even more individual game depth. I may even put on individual reviews of some of them to look at them a little bit deeper than what I have in this collection review, so do check that out and let me know in the comments if that's something you'd like to see from this channel. Starting off, we have Doodle World Redrawn. This is a fun little follow-up to the first game, which itself is self-described as a harder and more difficult follow-up to the original, in the same way that the Japanese version of Super Mario Bros. 2 was a harder game than the original one of that series. Like Super Mario Bros., this is a platformer where you cannot go backwards on a stage after you have moved on. You have a new double jump move, which means that levels can be designed around that move being in the game. This means you'll often have to play around with when to jump so that you can pull off the double jump at any point in the jump animation cycle. I can also say I was a good few levels into the game before I reached what seemed like an impassable canyon and realised that I wasn't using the run button to build up speed. Once again, another little Super Mario Bros. Style thing here. Now, the thing I don't like about this game is the hit detection. There are some enemies that you can jump on the head of and kill, and others that are pointy, and so you should avoid landing on them. So if something looks like it's a felt tip pen, you should be able to land on it, but if it looks like a thumbtack, you should not. But even when I'm certain I'm landing on the intended target's head, I sometimes get killed. It's like you can land on an enemy 99% at the angle so it's on the top of their head, but even if there is 1% where it thinks you've touched the side, you lose a life instantly. It's just a weird hit detection thing. You go to the end of a level and there'll be a little notepad for you to get through and finish the level, and I once had it where I touched it when I wasn't quite on a platform and then fell off the bottom. So there's a couple of little bugs in this game is what I'm saying. So I'm mostly inclined to play this game at a slower pace and avoid landing on the heads of enemies altogether. It just doesn't seem worth it. Also, I'm not as keen on some enemies walking off of the edge of ledges whilst others walk back and forth. It means you can't really tell what an enemy's attack pattern is going to be and have to take each one on a case-by-case basis. This is fine and adds some extra challenge in one sense, but in another sense it means you always have to second guess everything. And sometimes things which feel like obstacles aren't. In an early level you'll see pointy stalactites, and having learned that pointy things killed you, I tried to avoid them. Then I learned that it is just scenery and was okay to jump in front of it. Now, speaking of the graphics, it looks cool. It looks like the whole thing is a doodle on a notepad, and I even like the fact that sometimes the colouring in of objects is slightly outside the lines. So yeah, this one is quite good. Not the greatest thing in the world, but definitely a solid entry as the first one we're looking at on the Indie Heroes Collection 3. Next up, we have Skate Cat. Skate Cat! Another platformer which is short and sweet for you to get your teeth into. This one is okay, but it's not my favourite in the collection. Graphics are often quite bland, and unlike Doodle World, it's not really a stylistic thing. It just lacks a little bit of personality, and I say that considering that the artwork on the box art that you see on the menu of Skate Cat looks pretty darn cool. Although I got used to them, the controls are also a bit slidey. Some jumps feel like you need to be right on the edge and maybe even overhanging the edge with the front of your skateboard so that you can make it all the way across. And that includes even from the first level. The first level is a little bit too empty and lacking some things to do, but later levels, which are themed on being in trees or a factory, and maybe even eventually being in space, are a lot better. I'll try not to give the full spoilers, but there is something I do need to talk about, and that is you do get one level that mixes things up a little bit. Well, first things first, you do get a special attack part way through the game which allows you to attack and jump on enemies and pull off a cool trick. But the coolest thing is you suddenly, towards the end of the game, get a Back to the Future style hoverboard, and it's even pink, definitely as a reference to that game. But you don't use it to go backwards in time, not that you do in Back to the Future. You use it to go in space, which you don't in Back to the Future at all. It's just a shame there's only one level where you get to hover. There's also only one really challenging boss fight, and that is the final one. All of the others are super easy, but even then the final one isn't that challenging. It's just a case of dodging lasers and something that's shooting at you until you get the opportunity to kill the boss, and then he's actually quite easy too. Yeah, like Skate Cat, it's not a super long game, but it's quite fun for whilst it lasts, and it might be one that you come back to periodically. Bone Marrow is next, and it is a grid-based puzzle game where you match up swords and shields and barrels, and then you attack rats, snakes and demons. Yes, sign me up for some of that. It certainly sounds more interesting than Puzzle Bobble does. Well, actually, you play as a couple of dragons and you shoot and explode bombs. Yeah, that sounds pretty interesting too. But in practice, Bone Marrow, it kind of takes forever to get through a level, and you end up doing a bunch of the gameplay, I swear to God, with your eyes shut. And I'm not joking on that. I was playing this one late at night and I felt my eyes were drifting off, and I still won. The way the game works is that you slide all of the objects on the game board up, down, left and right so that matching objects will combine together. Every so often an enemy character will be added to the board, and by continuing to slide things you can end up giving the enemy objects to get stronger, which isn't what you want. But then if you slide up next to the enemy and continue to slide in their direction, it will be an attack on them. But they also attack you, so it comes down to just making sure you have more energy, more shield and more swords that you have equipped and picked up earlier in the level. And this is fine, but when you consider that some of the tougher enemies can sometimes have 100 plus hit points, and you have to perhaps slide against them 100 times if you don't have a sword, and yeah, it's just a little bit tedious. There is a night and day cycle which I kind of didn't pay tons of attention to, but it seems to kick in every time the board fills up, and then you can only seemingly pick up items or fight at certain times of the day. I feel like this is a game which I may get more into the more I play it, but as I was trying to play it quite quickly just for the purpose of this review, I found myself feeling a bit frustrated and rushing to try to get through it. It kind of felt a little bit random and tedious at times. Maybe when you're an expert you can win stages in a minute or two, but it was taking ages per stage, as you end up helping the enemy pick up items when you're trying to fight it, so it kept getting stronger again, and I think this means that the game could potentially last forever. It's good, but it's not the best thing ever. Maybe I'm wrong on this one if I need to give it more time. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The next game in the collection is Alien Cat 2 Enhanced Edition. This is a top-down puzzle game where you have to collect keys and avoid traps until you can open an exit portal. The first few levels are incredibly easy, just to ease you into things, and then they start to introduce you to a real challenge: controlling 2 alien cats at once. Now, it's a little bit like the cherry power-up in Super Mario 3D World, where you can control 2 versions of your character at once, and you have to work out how to complete objectives with one whilst the other doesn't get killed. Because you'll have your eyes on one and think, well, I just need to walk up there, but then you'll also be walking the other one up, sometimes into an obstacle that you don't want them to go into. The graphics on this one are simple but effective. There's not tons to it in terms of presentation, but I do quite like the animation of your cat walking into spikes or walking onto a landmine and seeing them explode. Yeah, this is quite a good game. Donut Dodo. So, Donut Dodo is far and away my favourite game in this collection, and a strong contender for my favourite game to play on Evercade, period. I still have my Game of the Month download on my EXP, which I have talked about in a previous video, so check that out, because I don't think anyone else still has theirs downloaded. In the game, you run around and have to collect all the donuts dotted around the level. Then once they're all collected, you can go for the big donut, which is guarded by the Donut Dodo. The game takes a bunch of attempts before you'll learn the way the enemies move about and how best to dodge them, but once you get into it, it's actually quite a simple and it is a fun game to just play over and over again. It doesn't really get boring to have to restart several times. The game only has 5 main levels and 1 bonus stage that plays differently from the rest of them. It's a bit like Donkey Kong mixed with the Popeye game, mixed with a few other like references to old arcade games of the early 1980s, and once you've got through the game, you just start over again, kind of like on Pac-Man. In fact, there are even the fruits that you can pick up like you do in Pac-Man, and one of the ghosts from Pac-Man makes a cameo, or at least a knockoff of it. But look, you only need to play through this twice to see the true ending of the game, not that there's much to it, so it's not like you're going to go through 100 times to get to a kill screen and then have you declared as the winner. So, for me, this game is worth getting the collection for all on its own, and everything else thereafter is a bonus. Fortunately, some of the others are really fun too. Speaking of which, we have Chibi Monster Brawl, which is stylized with Brawl spelt BR4WL, and that is because the focus is all about 4-player. Yeah, so this isn't a game just for 1 player. It says it can be a game for 1 player, but it clearly is designed only with multiplayer in mind. Now imagine if someone made Super Smash Bros. For the NES, but only had 1 day to make it. That kind of sums up what Chibi Monster Brawl is all about. And for all I know, this was made within 6 months, but I think it's a game that was made for a competition or something like this, but it is super short, there's not really much here. Now, I'm sure this is fun for up to 4 players playing together on the Evercade VS, but genuinely I'm not sure how many players ever talk about playing 4-player Evercade games together. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you do that. But hey, at least this is a game that justifies anyone buying the extra gamepads. You play as an incredibly small on-screen monster and have to collect cherries and apples to score points. You can also knock your opponent into hazards, and there are CPU-controlled zombies and environmental hazards like spikes and lasers that you can fall into. You have to be careful to dodge those because if you get hit, you lose points that you already earned. I found I was done with the single player experience and the 4 stages that seem to be all that's on offer here in about 5 minutes. Then I set up a 4-player game and did worse than the characters not controlled by anyone. Like, I had 3 non-characters, they were just sat there without players controlling them, and they were beating me, because when I attacked them, it knocked me off the edge of the stage, and I was dying more than them. Respawning just bumped me off the edge of the stage as well, because as soon as I go to move, I got knocked by them, and yeah, I died a lot more than the players that didn't have anyone controlling them. So there may be something I'm missing about this one, but considering the Evercade has 3 versions of handheld consoles that don't allow multiplayer, and only the VS that does, I imagine most people will never bother with this. It might be fun for a few minutes of multiplayer action, but I genuinely don't think Blaze should include games like this on Evercade carts that are only fun in multiplayer and don't offer a good, decent, or even minimal single player experience. This is beyond minimal. I know that this technically does have a single player game, but it feels like you're just testing the controls rather than playing it. So, next up, speaking of short games, there is Little Tales of Alexandria. And this one is intriguing. When you first play it, it seems super like Pokemon on the original Game Boy. The characters, the apartments you're in, the locations, the graphics, and even the text boxes for dialogue all seem like a lost Pokemon adventure. The good thing about this game is that you're in a world where you can speak to everyone and interact with everything, and they do point that out as a selling point of the game. But you can't pick anything up. And the only objective seems to be to reach the roof of the apartment block. The bad news is the entire game can be beaten in less than 90 seconds. And I'm not even joking. After I realised that you need not speak to anyone or go to every room to get to the roof, there was no chain of events that granted you access, no keys, no things that you had to do for a character that will let you then go to somewhere else, and you could just walk straight up to the roof. I put it to the test, and I finished the whole game, from resetting the game and starting a new game from the menu all the way past the end credits in under 90 seconds. So gameplay wise, I was probably playing for just over 1 minute. Some may say this isn't the point of the game, and that to enjoy it, you should speak to the characters and enjoy the story elements, but there really aren't any. The random bits of dialogue don't actually add up to anything. There's no conspiracy to uncover, there's little bits of intrigue that don't go anywhere. So they can be skipped. 90-second game right here. Fine for 5 minutes if you want to see everything, but truthfully, it was annoying how walking up to everything activated you reading information without having to press an action button. The room with all the TVs in was actually a pain to leave, as you can keep walking into the next TV and then back into the other one by mistake and trigger reading more. For what this is, it's an interesting experiment rather than even an experience, but it's barely a game. Next up, we have Cho Cho Mimic, which fortunately is definitely a game. Now, this one is from the same guys that brought us Flea and Tapeworm Disco Puzzle on the first 2 Indie Hero collections. It has the same recognisable graphical flair as those games, and the music kind of rang as being from the same people too. It's weird that there are multiple games on this cartridge where you have to guide clone characters through levels, although this one you plot out the route in advance and then set them off rather than controlling both at the same time directly like you do in Alien Cat 2 Enhanced. The game reminds me of some of the puzzles you'd have to do in Full Void on the Evercade, which I reviewed at the end of last year. You set out like ups and downs and lefts and actions, and then press a button just to see if it all works. Very much like on Full Void. And as I would have said in my review of Full Void, those puzzles remind me of Bill's Tomato Game, with a little dash of Lemmings in there. So once you know where all of the pieces need to go, like the ups, the downs, the jumps and stuff like this, you lay them all out and then hope for the best. Unlike Lemmings, it's not happening in real time where you have to drop the items in front or set the moves in front of the character. You just literally lay it all out before it gets going. So You have certain blocks and springs that you can position on the playing field, and once they're placed down where they need to be, you start your little knight off in motion. If they run into any danger, just a little bit like in Ghouls and Ghosts, they will lose their armor. And like I said, you can't directly control where he goes, but if you've put all of the arrows and blocks into the optimal position, he'll guide himself to the stage exit, which is an evil tongue-wielding treasure chest, I guess. Is a little bit like those automatic levels you have probably seen people create on Super Mario Maker. You plot out all of the positions of the blocks, and then you set your dude off into action. There's also coins on levels which you have to try to collect, and this adds some extra challenge compared to just reaching the exit. If you collect more coins, then you do better, but you don't need to collect the coins to have actually completed the level itself. This game isn't super long and has some inventive new ideas introduced along the way to keep things interesting. Maybe a couple of hours of gameplay, or maybe a bit more if you want to get all of the coins. Orebody Binder's Tale is the next game, so for anyone who wants to scratch that Mega Man itch, this is the game for you in this collection. I think it's a game that is either already part of a series, or there's going to be other games created in this series, because on the write-up about the game it says that there's going to be animation, more games, comic books, and I don't know, I don't know if any of these things already exist. It might be that nothing of that ever comes of it because it's just a little indie game, but this is definitely from someone who was interested in creating a world and setting up a shared universe. It's cool, but I'll only mention any of this because the intro scene was really long. It was just reading tons and tons of text, and I ended up skipping a bunch of it. My apologies about that. I know it's bad, as I should try to get into the lore more, but there are 13 games in this collection, and I wanted to get this review done. So maybe I'll go back and check out the rest of the story and see what I missed, but I just wanted to get on with the gameplay. Mega Man doesn't need to be quite that deep. In this game, you play as a robot who kind of does look like Mega Man, and this is a NES-style action platformer where you shoot things, go through stages themes on the usual selection of deserts and ice stages and so on and so forth, and periodically you'll get upgrades to your abilities and weapons. You can beat the game in an hour or two if you take it slow, but it's not always easy. I'll admit I used a few save states along the way for when some of the enemy attacks were just relentless. I like the boss battles against the giant worms, and there is a Darth Vader meets Psycho Mantis-like dude who has this floaty lightsaber. And the weird dog boss that looks like a bull that had gone through the matter transporter from the movie The Fly is another cool kind of The Thing looking disgusting monster. It's good to get the dash moves, which come in both ground and air varieties, and this is quite a fun game to play. The final boss isn't quite as challenging as I'd have expected, and the reward for beating it is you will be treated to a really lengthy sequence with more text and more story, but truthfully, by the time I got to this point, I did read some more of it because I felt like I'd earned reaching the ending. So, next up we have Magic and Legend Time Knights. And just going by the logo, I was expecting this to actually be full out, like Knights of the Round Table, but it's actually a time travel adventure and ends with a little TARDIS, which is a pretty cool Doctor Who reference. Now, it's a fun and very easy to beat platformer. It can probably be beaten in 10 minutes, which is a shame, but what is here is okay. The idea is you play across about 5 levels, and you have to kill all of the aliens on each level who are invading Earth through time, and then find the level exit. Along the way there are some bonus stages where you suddenly get turned into an octopus or a dragon and so on and so forth, and yeah, you just have to get through those, but I'm not sure if there's any actual purpose to doing them, because it doesn't seem like it changes anything whether you do well at the bonus stages or not. The game was originally made as a Game Boy Color game, and the graphics are very, very simple. Strangely, there is an odd mix of art styles in the cutscenes. The mom that you speak to And I say mom, not mum, even though this game ends in 1960s London, but the mom you speak to is literally a photograph, which I assume is the mum of the person or people that made the game. Then from scene to scene, the kids' artwork is a mix of looking American in style, like Hanna-Barbera or something, to Japanese anime or manga, however it's pronounced, and it's just odd that they don't seem to have a consistent art style on some of it. I'm not sure that I like that if you miss an alien or two and get to the exit point, that it just sends you back to the start of the level. I think there should have been a counter to show how many aliens are left in a stage, so you know if you should exit or backtrack. If it wasn't for this, I guess the game would have been beaten in maybe 7 minutes. I also felt that if you bumped into an enemy for some reason, they are given invincibility frames, and you can't shoot them straight away, but they can still attack you. Usually if you bump into an enemy, you are given a moment of invincibility, and that means you can then get away. They've kind of got it on the inverse of things here. You have 2 characters to play as in this game, and each level has a different sprite to match the time period, and that's cool. Like I said, you can be transformed into an octopus or a dragon, and then you can look like a ninja, you can look like a knight, and then whatever it is that you look like in the modern day, just a kid I suppose. And you have different like spears and like Japanese throwing stars and stuff, so your weapons change as well, and I do appreciate that effort. It's a short game, it's a decent game for it being this short, but it is super short. Next up we have Thunderpaw. Thunderpaw. It's been a few months since I played this as a Game of the Month game, and I was hit with a sense of nostalgia coming back to it. I like Thunderpaw, but I was also struck with the memory of all of the things I don't like about Thunderpaw. It's a game where there is a nuclear explosion and you play as a dog who has to go around shooting hench pigs and bears with lasers and taking out cats that have got evil Russian eye patches. Because reasons. I kind of didn't read the story on this one either. Even coming back to this a few months after I last did it, the first stage reminded me of all of the bad design choices that are present in this game. And this prevents it from being a really good game and instead just settling for being an okay, if somewhat frustrating game. The game is easy enough, but even the first level will see you running around the whole stage in a loop a bunch of times. And this isn't even on a fetch quest, but more likely than not you're going to jump to try to get one of the dog bones, and you're just going to miss and fall down to the beginning of the stage, and then run all the way around the stage again, and then miss again, and then realise, oh, there was a bad guy I should have shot, so you'll have to go round again and again. And the amount of times you have to do like a leap of faith because you can't see if there's a platform underneath the dog bone you're trying to get, it's just a little bit annoying and it's unnecessary. Add to this that there are gems that you collect for no obvious reason, and then for some reason your bullets only go a short distance in front of you and then they just evaporate. It means that you have to get very close to bad guys who can then shoot further than you. So that's a little bit of a frustration and doesn't really seem to need to be the case. Your bullets should just clear the screen. Also, and this is the most annoying thing, when you shoot your weapon, you'll jut backwards with a recoil, and this can often make you fall off of ledges. You'll spend much of your time tapping fire and then tapping forward to keep you roughly on the spot. And it's needlessly frustrating. But all this said, if you can forgive this aspect, it is actually quite fun. Again, it's about an hour of playtime to this one, and some of the bosses are slightly more challenging, one in particular more challenging than others. And with a couple of the games on this being really short, this one does feel a bit more like a meatier and full experience. Then we have Big Too Small, another game I already reviewed on the channel last year. Big Too Small is another puzzle game where you have to guide your characters to an endpoint. This one lets you move one character at a time, so it's not quite as conveyor belt mode as Cho Cho Mimic. Oh my god, Cho Cho Mechanic should be a game though, but doesn't give you quite the same control as Alien Cat 2. It very much moves on a grid system, system where you push in a direction and your character will walk all the way that direction they can. In the game, you have a mouse called Melanie, a goat called Giselle, and an elephant called Ellie. And there are foods that they would like to eat. Melanie eats cheese. The goat has an apple. And of course, as explained in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, an elephant works for peanuts. You press an action button to toggle between which of the animals you are controlling, and then you can use the D-pad to move that animal. When you push a direction, such as up or left, the animal will go across the screen in that direction as far as they can, until something blocks them from continuing in that direction. The objective is to work out the correct route across that level for each animal to get to the end point of their food. Now, I really like the strategy required in playing this one. Often you'll have to position one animal in a certain spot to block the path of another animal so they end up in the best place to reach their food. You'll usually have to work out the order in which the animals reach their destination as well. For example, you may find the mouse can go straight onto their cheese, but if they can do this without the use of another animal blocking its way to get to there, it usually means that the mouse will be the last one that needs to go to their food, and you'll have to use them to reroute the others. The animals do have some unique features to their gameplay. For example, the mouse can fit through narrow gaps, and Giselle the goat can jump over water and munch bushes to clear a path. This really adds to the strategy. Any level that has bushes on, I know the first thing I have to do is get the goat to go and clean them all up, and once they're all gone, then I can use the other animals how I want on the level. The graphics are very simple, but it's nice for a Game Boy Color game, if nothing memorable. Having played the version on the Evercade VS home console, I was aware that the light graphics felt a bit glary on the big TV, but I'm sure this would be fine if played on the Evercade EXP, or if you were playing this on the Game Boy Color, because I believe you can actually get this on the Game Boy. The sound of this game is quite simple, but it's effective. It's all typical Game Boy stuff, and so it'll probably get tiresome after a while, but it's inoffensive enough. Now, the trouble with this game is if you get stuck on a stage, you pretty much have no choice but to keep attempting it until it's done, as there really isn't anything else to do. But there you go, that is Big to Small. Finally, we have Bubble Seahorse Adventure. Now, this is a game I only reviewed a couple of months ago, and it's another short and inoffensive platformer. You play as a seahorse and you shoot bubbles at enemies across 14 levels. The game is challenging only in that the enemies can one-hit kill you all of the time, which is a real pain. Your bubble attack isn't very effective, but if you can pick up what looks like an Elvis wig, you'll be able to one-hit kill most enemies. And when you have it on, you also kind of look like Zoidberg from Futurama when he's in attack or mating season mode. Having this wig on is super important to the strategy of the game, as you'll need to transform some enemies into bubbles to use them as a platform, because the bubbles float up and you can ride them. It's a bit of a pain when you don't have the wig or miss landing on a bubble, because then you may have to restart the section because you don't always get that the enemies are plentiful enough or respawn. The final boss will be the only real challenge in the game, and as I detailed in my separate review of it a couple of months ago, it's not defeated the way I initially expected. So check out, because I said on the previous video about how you actually do that, so if you're playing it and stuck, you shouldn't get too stuck. It took me a few tries, but it isn't just a case of shooting it. There's a couple of sections of the game which are more on rails in nature to spice things up, but again, it's a game that you'll play through once or twice at most and probably be done in a single sitting. So there we have it, my in-depth review of Evercade's Indie Heroes Collection 3. There's a lot of clones and a lot of cats across this collection. It should have been called the Clones and Cats Collection. My favourite game on here is Donut Dodo by some margin, although Alien Cat 2, Big to Small, Doodle World, Binder's Tale and Cho Cho Mimic are all pretty decent too. Time Knights, Bone Marrow, Bubble Seahorse Adventures and Thunderpaw are also not bad, but not the greatest things ever. Same with Skate Cat is also worth a little look. The Little Tales of Alexandria is too short to recommend, and Chibi Monster Brawl is only worth a look if you've got 4 players. I did notice some slowdown in a couple of the games, and Donut Dodo noticeably took a weird amount of time to load between levels. Maybe I need to update the Evercade cartridge, but I've been yet to do that on any of mine, and because all of the games did work, I'll probably just leave it for now. But if I find out later that it fixes things and speeds things up, I'll make a note of it in the comments. So if you haven't done so already, I would appreciate if you would smash that subscribe button here on the Geek Battle Gaming YouTube channel. Check out the written article version of this review over at www.xstreamed.tv/gaming, and check out all of the stuff I've got on the channel at the moment. I've got all kinds of stuff for so many platforms, loads and loads of retro content, but also starting to get some documentaries and modern content on here as well, and I'm getting up a few videos every week. So let me know what kind of stuff you'd like to see more of on the channel. There's tons of Evercade stuff here, and there's going to be another one very soon, because my next review for the Evercade will be the C64 Collection 3. So that's going to wrap things up for the review of Indie Heroes 3. Notice it doesn't even say collection now, but it does on the side. So Indie Heroes 3, and this is a really good cartridge with a bunch of fun things which, unless you were into the indie scene, you won't have played anywhere in the past because they didn't exist until recently. So do make sure you smash that subscribe button here on the Geek Battle Gaming YouTube channel. Check out all of the different things we've got going on the channel. So if you like Evercade, I often do Evercade videos, and if you like other modern retro gaming stuff, there's lots of it on here, plus just some modern stuff and some gaming documentaries. Check out the written articles of this, as always, on www.xstreamed.tv/gaming, and with that, until next time, stay safe, always stay extremed, and ciao for now. Boom. And we're off the air.